all got to be in here for the long haul. So this is a great way to start the new year. No, this is, this is virtual Toronto Summer Institute, Ideas That Matter. And on November 12th, of course, we had four mini sessions, and then they were followed up with shorter sessions, or longer sessions, actually, I meant, and sort of in the learning marketplace mode. And today, Hope Leet Dittmeier and Whitney Kays are going to do phase 2 and take us through the adventures of Mattingly Edge, where it's been, where it is, and where it's going, because that's what we all need to hear about and get with the program. So thank you for doing this, Hope and Whitney, and let's get on with the show. Happy New Year, and here we go.
Thank you very much, Jack. I'm going to start while I'm still on the screen, because once I start the presentation, I don't get to see your lovely faces. So I want to stay with you for just a few minutes here. So thank you for letting us do this and for thinking it's important enough to share your time with us for a couple of hours here. We hope in the end it'll be well worth your time. I'm speaking for myself, but I think the same is true for Whitney. I'm more nervous about this presentation than I usually am. And it's because a bunch of the people on the screen in front of me are the people that I've learned from and most respect. And those are always the most nerve-wracking, right, presentations, because you so want to get it right for the people that you learned from and hold in the highest regard. It's also hard for me because I am very much a person, in person. I feed off the crowd, and it's about connecting to the people. And as soon as I start this presentation, you guys are all going away, and I'm going to be talking to a screen. And so that I'm not at the top of my game under those circumstances. So please give me a bit of grace about that. But with that being said, I will click this button that we tested before and make sure. Oh Lord. Do you at least see the screen? Going crazy?
All good.
All good. We're good. Okay.
Yeah, all good.
All righty. Very good. Thank you. So Whitney and I will be sharing a number of things from the perspective of Mattingly Edge. And we titled this Holding True to the Mission in the Midst of a Pandemic. And I recall maybe 2 months into the pandemic feeling really a sense of desperation that we were losing ground, that people's relationships were faltering from lack of being able to see each other, that we were so busy taking care of the day in and day out things that we weren't dreaming as big and such. And so we've had to be really intentional about how do we get through this pandemic together and still have good things happen. So what I'd like to share with you, what we'd like to do today is we're divided kind of into 3 pieces. And one is to talk about our intentions, because we believe very strongly here that what you intend is what creates reality. And one of my favorite authors, Wayne Dyer, says our intention creates our reality. So a big part of the presentation will be on that. And then we will, probably about halfway through, we'll break out into breakout groups to give everybody a chance to talk together about what they've heard so far. And then we're going to come back after we debrief from the breakout sessions. We're going to focus on the essential design features. So by that, we mean if these are our intentions, what guides us to know what to do? And how do we organize ourselves so that we can make progress on those intentions? And then finally, in the end, we'll share just a little bit about some of the lessons that we've learned from the coronavirus pandemic that we'll take forward from here to for our future learning. So that's kind of what you're in for. I hope that's what you were expecting. So let's start in with our one of our biggest intentions, and then this actually comes directly out of our mission statement, is to cultivate partnerships and collective action. What we mean by collective action is the collaborative effort that takes place when groups gather and diverge from the social norms of the situation. And so we believe at Mattingly that we need to diverge from the social norms, that what typically happens for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is not good. And that it instead continues, the system itself continues to hold people hostage in service land. And so we need a way to diverge from the social norms. And we also know that it's going to take a collective action. In other words, it's more than what our organization can accomplish together. So we're going to have to forge collective action in order to make the kinds of things we want to happen in people's lives. Now, this is not hold on a second. This is not a mission that most service providers in our world would see as an important part of their intention or important part of what they do. What most organizations would say they do is they're in the business of providing a service. And the problem for people is much less about are they getting a service than are they getting a life, right? And so this notion of what people really need is something we don't have to hand them, right? People need homes, but we don't have homes. People need jobs, but we don't have jobs. People need friends, but we have staff, we don't have friends. So what people really need is something we can't, or service can't directly hand over to people. And so this notion of partnering with community and with society as a way, I'm sorry, I just need to click this real quick here, as a good way of helping good things happen in people's lives is a really important part of the work that we do, and by definition is our work. Go forward. I'm sorry. All right. So it's going to be necessary that we learn, that we focus on reaching out to other people in community, that we can't really do our job unless we do. And this begins, of course, with social networking. Now, I'm not so much talking about any particular platform or social media, but good old-fashioned social networking, right? Who knows somebody who knows somebody? And so a big part, this is a question that you'll hear people at Mattingly refer to a whole lot, is do you know someone who? And it might be owns rental property because somebody's looking for housing, or it might be works at the university because somebody wants to audit a class at the university or learn more about it, or who lives in Germantown, right? Because somebody we know has just moved into the neighborhood and could. And so this notion of reaching out to people, and we do this in a number of ways. Usually what we would do is firstly start with social networking inside the person we're operating on behalf of, inside their own personal network, right? So who do they know that might? That's the best of all worlds. If they don't have it within their network, someone, then we might look at their family and current allies to say, does somebody you know somebody? Oftentimes those two things don't work because people are so isolated, and we have to resort to the idea, okay, of reaching out publicly. And we often start with our staff because we have employees, a workforce that's pretty well connected. And so we might send an all staff email. We might reach out to our vendors, for instance, our business vendors, about our banker, do you know a realtor, that you work with or whatever. But we continue to reach out. And most of this is done on a personal kind of one-to-one level. We'll get the word out, and then have preferably pre-COVID face-to-face, let's get together and chat about this kind of thing. or at least personal kind of contact. So it's not the kind of friending that you necessarily do on Facebook and such. And so finding the right people. Once you find the right people, you have to figure out, of course, how you're going to approach them. And this is really the narrative power of storytelling. So we tell people stories, and we tell them in a way, hopefully, that connects to the need, right? So that says, would you, or do you have, or I heard that you own rental property, right? And so each of these stories are going to be told differently depending on who you're talking to. But the story is always one that strives to emphasize commonality between people, right? The person that you're telling the story to and the person whose story is being told, that there's a common piece to that. And so the storytelling part is really pretty complicated, because you want to appeal to people's desire to be involved, but you certainly don't want to tell a story in a way that engenders pity, that makes people feel obligated, or that others the story that you're telling. And so it's important that, of course, the person whose story you're telling has given you permission to do that and knows what you're going to be both telling and potentially asking for. And so oftentimes I will script these stories in advance. And then it's time for the invitation. And I learned from my good friend Tom Kohler many years ago about this structuring the invitation. And he says that it's really important that the person you're telling this story and appealing to knows precisely why you're asking them instead of somebody else, right? That it ties to, so that it's not just anybody could do this, but really somebody like you, right? And so you might say specifically something like, I know you've been involved in the environmental activist community for many years and would know lots of people and lots of opportunities there. I know somebody who really just came to realize how important that is and would like to get more involved, since you have so much experience and connections, right? So that it's tied specifically to that person. And again, the invitation should be one that people have a comfortable out, so that we don't have people doing things that they feel obligated to do. Under the best circumstances, when possible, figuring out a win-win situation, or a situation where their interest in being involved could somehow be mutual, is the best of all circumstances. And sometimes you can craft things in that way. That's often the way we ask people for things, is that becomes a mutual thing. So I'm going to turn this over to Whitney to tell Shanae's story, which is probably one of our better stories in terms of working toward collective action and partnerships.
All right. Can you guys hear me all right? I will say that for the next 11 minutes, there is also a second grade math class happening in my near vicinity. So if you hear something about prime numbers, that's what that's about. So anyway, I'll get to Shanae. So Shanae, this is one of my favorite pictures of Shanae. And one of the reasons is because her personality really shines through in the picture. She is 42, and she is somebody who is just vibrant, and she has a great sense of humor. She loves to joke around with people. And when I first met Shanae, it was at the day program at Mattingly. I actually met her on my very first day there. And Shanae is somebody who has had a pretty difficult life. She has kind of gone back and forth between different residential and day program providers. And she also is somebody who would have the reputation locally in our community of somebody who tells lies and tries to get attention and things like that. And those of us who actually take the time to get to know her know that that's all baloney and that she's actually telling the truth about some pretty traumatic things that have happened in her past. And so for Shanae, we just decided that we were going to need to do something about this because this was not fair what was happening to this woman. And so, Hope, I can't click. Can you click over to the next one for me? Okay. This is a little picture of what Shanae's life looked like when we first started spending some time with her. We call it living in service land. And really, this was, Hope said it best earlier today, this is a well choreographed shit show for her life. And so she lived in 4 different homes over a 5-year period. There was adult protective services that got involved in more than one of those homes. She was moved about with like 0 input or checking the place out. There were actually times that she would go to a day program and somebody would come pick her up and say, well, now you're going to a new place to live. She had 6 different state guardians within a 5-year period. She had no right to vote. Not the last home she lived in, but one of the last homes she lived in, 1 room. The home wasn't accessible, so she would get wheeled in through the front door, and because none of the rest of the house was accessible, her living room became her bedroom, her kitchen, her bathroom. Every space in the home, everything happened in this 1 room. And she didn't have a shower for 3 years. She just had bed baths, not because there was a medical reason for it, but because she couldn't get into the bathroom. There was no door on the bedroom because, again, it was a living room. For a period of time, she even shared that living room with another person, and they had like a folding partition that separated the 2 of them. She had a boyfriend she wasn't allowed to see. She couldn't have her family or her friends come over and visit. She had no real personal belongings. She didn't get a say in what her house looked like, what pictures were up on the wall. The neighbors, people assumed she was a guest in the home. They didn't feel like she was a neighbor. She was a guest there. She got moved away to places that were far away from transportation services. So even when we would make progress in helping her get involved in a church or the YMCA and making friends, it would all get ripped away with another move because she then had no more transportation. Most people in her life really saw her as a child, a dependent, or a client. Go ahead, Hope.
Oh, well, it's not. Why is it not moving? Give me a second.
So we kind of decided that, that wasn't a good enough ending to Shanae's story for us. We couldn't just let transportation and all the things that were happening to her be a reason to just be like, oh, well, see, it's not going to work. So through all of that and all the trauma in her life, Shanae still had hopes and dreams for her own future. And what you're looking at now, a lot of you all probably know Brittany Curry. She's the illustrator of this. And we did these like visioning maps for a bunch of people that we worked with. And Shanae was one of those people at that time. And Shanae really talked about the things that she wanted in her life. And all of these things on here are things that you and I would have on our vision maps. She wants to live closer to her family. She wants a job. She wants to, if you see down at the bottom, it says like, connect with others who love the same music. And it says Whitney and Janet. That is Whitney Houston, not me. She has a very specific music interest. She wants to learn how to cook and have friends over and family over for potlucks and supper clubs and things like that. And so one of the ones at the bottom says the salon. She never went to a salon, a hairstylist. The residential provider would bring somebody into her home and they would just shave her head with clippers. Like she never even got to experience what most women experience, going and deciding how you want your hair. She didn't have a say in that. They just did it for her. But through all of that trauma, like, this is a strong woman. She said, this is what I want for my life. And so we would go about and try to help her figure this out. Go ahead, Hope, to the next one. So through all of this, Shanae was able to show those pictures to a bunch of people in her life, residential providers, case managers, state guardians, and all this stuff. And there was a lot of, everybody was under a lot of pressure because adult protective services were involved. And so this was really our opportunity to say, well, why don't you just let us try it? Like, clearly it's not working. Can we try? And so we were able to get Shanae hooked up through our local Section 8 program and get her a Section 8 voucher. And affordable, accessible housing is a nightmare. I'm sure you guys, wherever you all are living, it's the same issue, and it's a nightmare here in Kentucky. And we looked for 4 months for a place for Shanae to use her Section 8 voucher and couldn't find anything, and she actually lost her voucher. And very shortly afterwards, we would tell our story to everybody. Like Hope was saying, we were calling board members, bankers, anybody we could to tell the story, to see if anybody could help us out. And eventually this man, Kurt, he's actually one of our DSPs. And right about this time, he was buying a new house. And he said, look, I hear you tell this story of Shanae, and I feel like I'm supposed to be helping. And I was planning on selling my house, but if we can figure out a way to make this work, what if I was her landlord and I would become her Section 8 landlord? And we said, yep, let's do it. And so that's what we did. And this is a picture of Shanae and Kurt, and Shanae was paying her deposit and signing her lease. And so this is what the house looked like. You can go ahead, Hope. And, Kurt is a bachelor, and it needed some attention for a younger woman to live in the house, and it was also not accessible. And so there was a lot of work that went into, again, reaching out and building relationships with people to figure out who can help us do this. So Hope, I think the next one shows, this is Dawn. We knew that the house needed, in order to make it accessible for her, remember she hasn't had a shower in 3 years. That was my number one priority. She needed a roll-in shower wherever she lived. And so that was going to take a little bit more work than getting a volunteer crew. And so Don was a contractor, and he just happened to go to Hope's church, and Hope shared Shanae's story. And he said, yeah, I want to help. And so he partnered with us, and he did a lot of the work, the blueprints and things like that as volunteer. We did pay him for the cost of labor for what it took to really do that bathroom. That was a lot of work. And so Dawn and Shanae stay connected. They're Facebook friends. Shanae will send him cards, and they'll say hi to each other on Facebook from time to time. And it's a nice way for them to stay connected through COVID, even when normally Hope would want to have, Shanae would want to have Dawn over to her house for like dinner and things like that. Can't do that right now. So we had the contractor line up, and then we needed some work teams. And so every weekend for, how long was it, Hope?
4 months.
4 months. Every weekend we had a group of people show up to the house to help volunteer. And they were doing things like ripping up carpet and flooring and painting. And Shanae was able to go through, for the first time in her life, she got to pick out the paint that she wanted in her house and what color she wanted the walls to be. And it was a nice learning experience because Shanae's favorite color, well, at this point, was purple. And she wanted every single surface in the house to be purple. And so there was a bit of a learning curve to say, okay, well, you need a roommate. I don't know if purple would be good on every wall, and let's find some different shades of it. And so it was great for her to be able to pick all that stuff out. And so all these people are people who, actually everybody in this picture is still connected with Mattingly in some way. You can go ahead, Hope. Michelle, so Michelle, at this time, she was one of our board members, and she, again, because we told Shanae's story to anybody who would listen, Michelle had some experience doing some grant writing, and so she wrote 2 different grants to try to get some of the expenses and the accessibility stuff paid for. One of those grants actually did end up getting picked up, and I think that was what paid for, was it the shower, Hope?
Yes, the shower, roll-in shower.
Yeah, the roll-in shower. And so, that was the way that Michelle was able to help contribute to this cause. Go ahead, Hope. then it was time for a roommate. Shanae, we knew that she needed to have somebody who lived with her. She is a wheelchair user, and she's not able to get in and out of bed by herself. So for safety reasons, she really needed to have somebody who lived there with her. Plus, she had a state guardian who was under the impression that Shanae could never be left alone a minute in her whole life. And so we recruited a woman. This is her roommate, Carlin. And Carlin actually came to us, even though we made flyers and we posted them all over town and online and on like message boards. And Carlin actually was a friend of one of our support workers. And Carlin was a special education assistant in one of the public here locally. And she happened to be looking for a place to live and felt like this was a great choice. And the two of them became great friends. And Carlin brought a lot to Shanae's life around learning how to decorate a house and like take pride in it and it doesn't matter that we don't have money, we can create things together that can go on our wall and things like that. And so Carlin, it's important to note that Carlin is not a Mattingly employee. She is a citizen who went into basically like a rental agreement with Shanae and her guardian. She never has been on our payroll. And, it was pretty interesting because, Shanae had the state guardian who, at the time that we made the plea for Shanae to move into her own home, she had this great state guardian who was like, yeah, let's do it. And she was open to trying just about anything. And like most good state guardians, they can't take the bureaucracy of the system anymore and they leave. And so Dominique was her state guardian who was great and left. And then Dominique's replacement was not so great. And she was under the impression that if you had a disability, you couldn't live on your own and you had to be in a day program and you had to be with your peers. And Shanae vocalized as best as she could that was not what she wanted, but nobody would listen. And when that state guardian told the case manager to start putting out referrals for staff residents for Shanae, we knew that we had to do something about that. And again, through networking, we met Megan. And Megan is the sister of one of our employment specialists. And we started talking to Megan, and Megan and I went out for coffee a lot, and we talked about it. And Megan and Shanae spent a lot of time together and got permission to learn how to support her and find out about her finances and things like that. And eventually, actually right before the pandemic hit, this is a picture of Megan and Shanae at our local courthouse, and Megan was awarded guardianship. And this has been made a big difference for Shanae because it really makes her feel safe and stable, and that like not at any moment her life isn't going to just be upended and she's going to be moved without her permission. She and Megan spend a lot of time talking to each other and learning about what Shanae wants from her life. No, I'm doing something. Go. Sorry. All right, go ahead, Hope.
Yeah. So Shanae's story is one of our best in terms of the necessity of reaching out to people and doing that as a major kind of part of our work. Beyond just kind of personal assistance that we provide Shanae. A second intention that we have has to do with helping people thrive rather than just survive. And our field is full of examples of, low expectations, of people settling for less and, a poverty kind of mindset and lack of ambition on everybody's part. And we see evidence of people just getting by every day. In fact, I've heard on more than one occasion, right? Not our employees, but other organizations talk about just, just need to get through the day with everybody still alive, right? And that's not how most of us live our lives, trying to get through the day. Now, during this COVID, there have been days like that, but in general, we have more ambitious dreams for ourselves. And so thriving versus surviving says to us, we have to hold ourselves accountable for really ambitious kinds of outcomes and lifestyles, that we have to really raise the bar and keep the bar high for people, so that we want their lives to look like our lives do, instead of some semblance of that. And so that leads us to another question. We talked about the question of who knows somebody who knows. The question related to this is, what would be even better? What would be even better? And kind of having very low tolerance for settling or being satisfied with this, but always looking to, so what's next? What other opportunities does this create? So examples of what we would consider ambitious outcomes really includes helping people become a homeowner, or go to college, or get a debit card and build their credit score, and plan an exotic vacation, be promoted at work, learn to use public transportation so they're not dependent on other folks. Things that are really life changing and life improving, and trying to hold ourselves accountable to that. So Whitney's going to share the story now of what that looks like in Graham's life. Right, Whitney? Or are you teaching children?
I just didn't unmute it. My bad.
Okay.
Class is over now, so I'm good. So this is Graham. Graham is somebody that we've supported for 6 years now. Go ahead, Hope. Mm-hmm. Graham is a really great example of thriving and not surviving. He lives in his own home. He's got a roommate, and it would have been super easy for him over the pandemic to just hunker down and survive it. But that's not what he did. He tried so many different things over the course of the last 9 months. And one of the things, I'm just going to give you all some examples, was making candles. And so this was the early stages of what making candles look like. For Graham, you can see there were forks and pencils involved, and then they got some other different materials to put it in, and they tried out scents and different wicks and all kinds of different things. And over the course of 9 months, he really started perfecting it. And the end result for that, go ahead to the next one, Hope. Mm-hmm. He ended up making candles for Christmas gifts for his friends and family, and he would go around and deliver it. And so he ended up picking out the jars that he felt did best. He designed the labels that are on it, and the Christmas trees, or the snowflakes that are on top, they were just from dollar store, and they were a color, and he ended up painting them and making them look nice. And then he and his supporter would drive around town, and they put a nice little handwritten card in it and deliver it to people in his life that he stays in contact as best as he can, but because of COVID, not to the extent that he wants to. So this is a really great example of him really pushing the boundaries and perfecting his craft before getting it right. Graham is he is a horror, Halloween, anything scary enthusiast. He loves it. So down at the bottom where it says Doll of Terror. So at the beginning of COVID, when everybody was at that point when they were getting really stir crazy and didn't know what to do with themselves, Graham took that bottled up energy, and he and his supporter made a horror movie. And he found this old doll of his sister's from their childhood that looked really creepy, and made this entire short movie basically. And he discovered from that he really liked video editing, and there's a picture of him at his computer working through different programs. And so as that progressed, we're getting close to Halloween. And so then he decided he was going to build this Graham's House of Horror. I don't even know how to explain it. Hope, did you ever go through it with him or at all?
Yeah,
on Facebook?
He would just create these really crazy video things, and people would watch them together and be scared and so forth.
and he tried to scare you and had these scary movies. And so he found in himself this love of editing. And for him, that's turned into something that his employment team is now really looking at. Like, is this something that could be a job skill or maybe an internship to learn even more about video editing? He's at a pretty basic level right now, but he has such a great interest in it. He also, over the course of the last 9 months, has won and been appointed to a lot of different things. He was just very recently appointed to by the governor of Kentucky to the Kentucky Commission on Services and Supports for Individuals with Intellectual Disabilities or Other Developmental Disorders. And that's just getting started, so we don't really know what all that's going to entail. But he is one of a very few people across the state who now has the ear of the governor and his people. And he's a very devout advocate around these kinds of things. He also was involved in our Kentucky's First Partners in Policy Making, where he learned about what it took to be a good advocate, which is what resulted in the whole stuff with the Governor's Commission. He also this year won an APSI award for some of his work for when he went to work. He is currently looking for a new job, though. Okay, I hope you can go to the next one.
Yep.
On top of all that other cool stuff, here's some other stuff that Graham has done over the last 9 months. He has done some volunteering. He when all of the Black Lives Matter stuff was happening here in Louisville, a organization popped up called the David McAtee Community Kitchen, and a pretty famous local chef shut down his very famous restaurant and instead made it the David McAtee Kitchen. And David McAtee was a local person who was shot by the police during the Breonna Taylor stuff that was going on. And so it just so happened that right down the street, like right on the corner of Graham Street, they were doing this where people were coming together and making meals for service industry workers who had lost their job. And so usually once, sometimes twice a week, Graham would go down there and he would hand out meals to service workers who would come and get them. He's also been a teacher during all of this. We're going to tell a little bit more about this in a minute, but he and one of his support workers would present to a 7th grade class around disability identity. He's done that for 2 years in a row now, and he really enjoys doing it, and hears back from students and family members of those students how important that lesson had been for their child. He's also been a student. He has been doing, he took a course with Hope around how to be a good employer. And it was really an opportunity to help some of the people that we support learn the skills around what it takes for them to be a good employer to their DSPs. And he also took some, I can't read my handwriting. He's working on being a homeowner. And what that means for him is he's taking classes on home ownership and how to get his credit up. Because currently his parents own the home that he lives in, and his plan is to get it up, his score up high enough so that he can then purchase it from his parents and it's in his name. And he's also been a club member of lots of different things. And Baba Shooks, which I know nobody knows what that is. This is the name of his horror movie club that he attends. Him and a bunch of friends get together and watch horror movies together. And over COVID, they've been doing it over Zoom so that they can all still get together in a safe way. He's also a hasher, which means it's a running club for fun, but the reason that makes it fun is because you do drinking along the way. And for Halloween, he was in charge of making the Jell-O shots for his hasher group. And so one of the stops was at his house where he would hand out Jell-O shots to the other runners. And then finally, he over the break, the Baba Shooks and the Hashers have been things that he's been doing for a couple of years now. But this LP listening group is a new thing that started over COVID, and they get together every Tuesday evening and they listen to an album. And each week somebody can put forth a suggestion, and you join in over Zoom and everybody listens and they talk about the music. And so Graham is a great example of somebody who's really thrived over COVID versus just surviving. I think there might be. This is just a screenshot from the class that he taught, My Disabled Identity. The first time they did it, it was in person, and this year it had to be over Zoom. So there was a lot of learning curve involved in understanding how to present and be competent over Zoom versus in person. And Graham is a performer, and he reached out to a friend of his named Randy, who is the woman in both of these pictures. And Randy is a accomplished storyteller. So Graham reached out saying, I need to learn how to be a better storyteller. Can you help me figure this out? And that ended up into Randy. Randy is the teacher of the classroom. She's the 7th grade teacher. And she said, you know what? I think that my students have a lot to learn from you. If I help you with a story, can you do a class? Can you come to my class and help teach this lesson? He's like, yeah, that'd be great. And then over COVID, this is actually in Graham's backyard. He invited Randy over for a social event, and they put up a screen on the back of his house, and they're watching a movie and having snacks and drinks together, socially distanced. So it was a great way to use relationships to kind of feed off one another. One leads to something else, and I have something to give you as well, and not just being the recipient of needs.
Thanks, Whitney. So you can see Graham is thriving, and I feel certain within months of COVID, the other side of COVID, Graham will have a good job and close to being ready to purchase his home. So another one of our intentions is employment first, and most people are familiar with this. It's the idea that employment should be the default option for how people spend their time, so that rather than like it is here, Kentucky, the default is you leave high school and you go to a day program, that the default should be that you move into employment. And we believe very strongly in that because, as I just said, we want people to have ambitious lives with a high standard. And so along with employment comes a lot of respect, a lot of opportunities, a lot of relationships, a lot of opportunity to improve your standard of living and so forth and so on. So we obviously don't require people to work, but we do strongly encourage people to work. And for people who aren't sure about work, we really try to find ways to help them dip their toes in the water to get a taste of it, what it might be like. So that might be something like volunteer work, or it might be having somebody interview 10 people they know and ask them why they work. Right? What are the good reasons to work? But so whether people are really working or not, it's on the radar all the time. This is a quick clip of a story of a woman who got a job during COVID recently, and it's pretty brief. It is very low volume, so you are going to need to really listen or turn the volume up on your. Oh. Play. There it goes.
My name is Patricia Baldwin. I'm 30 years old, and I have a degree in media studies from Spalding University. And I am an optometric technician at the VisionWorks on Breckenridge Regional.
My name is Brent Dabney. I've been with VisionWorks for going on 14 years, the general manager of the DuPont location on Breckenridge Lane.
My plan for the future is pretty much to build in VisionWorks and go up the ladder to get a higher job in VisionWorks.
So the volume is really poor on that. I'm going to stop it right there. But the idea here is that people can get jobs during COVID. And in fact, some businesses desperately need employees because many of their employees are out for reasons related to COVID. And so Tricia started her job part-time She's the person who checks you in and then does the screenings before you go see the doctor. And she started part-time, and within 2 weeks she was full-time. And her boss is talking about promotions already, so she's awesome. The next one, which that I'm going to play here, that has much better volume. And
hi, my name is Mary Reed Sheffer, and I'm an employment specialist with Edge Employment. When I tell people that I represent folks with disabilities to find integrated, gainful employment, they usually assume that my work has come to a screeching halt during the pandemic. People assume that folks with disabilities are inessential to a business's productivity, or that they're the first to be let go when a business has to make cutbacks. The next two stories I'm about to share with you show that people with disabilities are not only being hired during the pandemic, but that they're essential assets to their employers. Emma was 18 when we met and a high school graduate. She was a burgeoning visual and digital artist with a full portfolio, and she'd taken so many press and art center classes that her head was bursting with ideas. Emma was a volunteer in a preschool art classroom, and once I was able to see her in action, I knew that her best job fit would combine her love of art and children. One week, when we went to her weekly Zumba class at the YMCA, we realized that the Kids Club was hiring. While we originally had pictured Emma in an assistant role within a preschool classroom, the Kids Club hired Emma to work solo with 0 to 10-year-olds every weekday. Emma's been employed for over a month, and she loves it. When we met, Tricia was 29 years old with a Bachelor of Science in Media Studies and Communication from Spalding University. As a certified swim and dive officiate, I was able to see Tricia's endurance and attention to detail in action. When I observed her volunteering as a swim instructor for the Adult Learn to Swim program, I knew she had a way with people, no matter who it was. Through our employment process, Tricia's swim teammate and executive at VisionWorks found out Tricia was looking for work and asked her to interview with their company. Tricia was hired as an optical technician in the reception and pre-test areas of their medical office and was quickly promoted from part to full-time in under 3 months. For a time, Tricia was their only trained employee at reception. Aside from meeting excellent job candidates like Tricia and Emma, benefits of hiring through Edge Employment include the fact that we know the job candidates we represent by spending time with them, observing the things that they're already good at. We also look to you and your business needs to develop customized jobs, even if one does not currently exist to fit a job candidate we represent. Employment relationships with Edge Employment are always mutually beneficial, meaning we don't do placements or charity hires. A job candidate we represent has skills to contribute to your business, and we wouldn't suggest them otherwise. You also will receive ongoing direct access to me, the employment specialist, even after a job candidate is hired and fully onboarded to your business. We can do troubleshooting and advanced trainings even years after they're hired. Customized employment is also shown to reduce hiring, recruiting, and training costs because we bring the custom referral right to you and give support during the training process that makes it go as efficiently as possible. You also have the potential to improve your workplace culture by filling vacancies that put pressure on current employees and increase your productivity by hiring efficiently using customized employment to strategically fill places where you need support and not where you don't. Edge Employment knows job candidates. You know your business. Together, we have the potential to create careers for dedicated and talented individuals with disabilities. Thank you for your time. Hi.
So you can see that we take employment seriously. In fact, during COVID, we have increased the number of employment specialists that we have. And I'll share a little bit later about where that direction is going. Another really important intention for us is this the notion of having dominion over a home of one's own. So the first step is actually helping people find housing, right, and advocate on behalf of that direction. But it's another thing to help people fully benefit from a home of one's own. I'm going to turn it back over to Whitney to share with you the story of Jean.
All right, this is Jean. When we met Jean, Jean already had a home of her own. but she didn't have a roommate. And over the last couple of years, a lot of work has gone into helping Jean make her home her own space, and not her mother's or not her roommates, but something for her. Go ahead, Hope. Jean is a very, very talented needlework, crocheter, anything that has to do with her hands. She is very, very talented. And so it was important that her home reflect that. And this is a space in her home, her craft room / office. You can see this is where her sewing machine is. She wanted to have some natural light, so she positioned it near her patio door so she could get good light. And as you can see, well, clearly this was Christmas time, so you see the Christmas decorations up, but also plants are really important to Jean, and you can see a variety of plants placed throughout. Go ahead, Hope. She has this very cute little outside patio, and it was important that she figure out a way to make that her own space. And so she started, she calls it her little garden. And so she planted, on the left, she planted these flowers, and she was really excited when they bloomed because it turns out orange is her favorite color. And so she was very happy when her flowers turned out to be orange once they bloomed. And she also did like a little herb garden and a place to make it look really nice. And for Jean, she really loves cooking and baking, but she's really scared of the stove. And I'm not sure if something happened to her when she was younger. So her kitchen space has been adapted for her. She doesn't do great at standing over a counter. She needs to kind of sit down. And so all of her cooking takes place by her sitting at a table that's big enough where things can be brought to her. So in the picture on the left, she and her supporter made some pizza, and she was able to sit there and put the toppings on. And on the right, she was working on a recipe for baking. And so she was working on measuring it out and stirring it. And so her kitchen became her space.
So Whitney and I are realizing how much we need to speed this up. So we're going to go at a little bit more of a clipped pace. I'm sorry. So you'll notice that Jean has dominionship, and it also includes in people's homes their decision of when to get up and when to go to bed and when to eat and how to decorate and who's allowed to come and what are the rules of the sport for the supporters who come in, and who do they host and invite in, and so forth and so on. Another real intention for us is to focus on relationships, connection, and belonging. That's not probably new information to anybody on this call, but the constant attention to such. And so Whitney is going to share with us a bit about Donna.
Yeah, so this is Donna, and Donna has a really good story around continuing to push relationships forward and not just settling with one thing. So when we first met Donna, she became involved with a walking club at our mall. And really, the only cool thing about the walking club is that nobody really did the walking. They just went to the food court and got coffee and snacks, and they played cards and things like that. And so Donna, that was everything she ever wanted. And so she started going to this walking club. And it didn't take too long for people to really see her as a valued part of this group. And there was a couple who had just had their 50th wedding anniversary, and Donna got invited to the party for it. And, it would have been easy for us to say, all right, well, great. We did a great job. Now we're done. But we decided to push it forward. You can go ahead to the next one, Hope. And so some of the other things, aside from the walking group, Donna is a member of the YMCA, and she goes twice a week. And in fact, when she is at the YMCA, there was such careful intention around helping Donna get to know some of the other people in her different classes that she took, so that they became a part of Donna's life as well. And when she goes to the YMCA, it's the only time in her life that she goes off the Medicaid grid. She's completely independent. She gets dropped off at the door and then picked back up once her class is over. And it's the only time she gets to be by herself with her friends. She's also a volunteer. This is a picture of her where she's volunteering at the Louisville Nature Center. And her job there originally was to open the bird blinds. This is what you see here. She feeds the bird feeders. And behind her, you see that black window. Well, over to the right more is a full window where people are inside and they can watch the birds coming to the bird feeder. And so her job was to open it. And she was so dependable that they started giving her more and more tasks to do there. And then finally, one of her more important roles in her life is that she's a volunteer at a local nonprofit called Water Step. And I was going to show a video, but I'm not going to show it now because it takes a while to go through it. But, you know, at Water Step, she is a part of a team that creates these chlorine generators that get sent all over to the world to places that don't have clean water. And Donna puts pieces together for it. And her relationship with the other volunteers there, she's just an integral part, and they couldn't do it without her being there. Go ahead, Hope, and I don't.
Yeah, I think
Well, it's going to play it.
I don't know
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we'll send the link to you to be able to watch the video. It's not that long, but we're pressed for time. So we're all hardwired for connection, right? And that is a really important part of. And you've kind of heard both through Graham's story with Randy, the teacher and the storyteller, and Donna's stories with this, the constant effort to continue to make new relationships, but to also really build on existing ones. Another thing that's really important intention of ours is the idea of adulting, that way too often people with intellectual and developmental disabilities continue to live lifestyles that look like the lifestyles of children. And so to be an adult implies both you enjoy the privileges, but that you have the responsibilities. And often people with disabilities, because of the expectations, the lack of exposure, so forth and so on, have never really even thought about responsibility, what is theirs to do, what they must do. And so people really need a fair amount of assistance to be able to do this. Not everybody wants to assume the responsibilities, and there's conversations that need to be had about that also. So Whitney, you want to
Here's some more pictures. Yeah, these are some more pictures of Shanae, who you heard about some of the difficult parts of her life. And so when she moved into her own home, she really had some responsibilities that she had to do that she'd never had to do before. And some of that included cooking, and how can we help her be a part of that? And her roommate, Carlin, this is a picture of the two of them on their front porch. And, you know, the roommate really has an essential role of being a good role model for Shanae. And what is it that adulting looks like? And what is it that she could emulate? Go ahead, Hope.
So this is a pretty brief one, isn't it, Whitney?
Yeah.
It's 1 minute, so we'll make time for it.
Now, that's hard. I never had did nothing this on my own. So, it's good way, but it's hard too. This house, better than that house I used to live. I don't have one valentine. This is my house. I'm living. I'm sleeping more. Get my view rest. And I'm sleeping between my always want to live. Which is living my own little world. Log green, log in like this. Welcome to Shanae Glenn's house.
All right.
Here you go. Thank you, Whitney.
There we go.
So this notion of adulting, I love this thing, that horrifying moment when you're looking for an adult, but then you realize you are an adult. I think that's the experience that a lot of the people we support have. Like, you look around for an older adult, an adultier adult, someone better at adulting than you, right? And so we know that we need to help bring to people's attention the necessity of acting like and assuming the responsibility adult, and making sure that they also get the privileges that come with adulthood. Another really important intention on our part is to be the kind of relationship that we have with the people that we support is relational and personal rather than transactional. So a transactional relationship is one that has purely to do with the exchange of money back and forth. I provide you 4 hours a day programming, you provide me 4 hours worth of funding to do that. We really are much more interested in getting to know people, having a genuine relationship, partnering with them and helping them achieve the kind of life they want, regardless of the money that exchanges hands, or more importantly than the money that changes hands. So Whitney will share a bit
And so this
about
is
that.
Justin. Yeah, Justin is a guy who many would describe as somebody with really complex support needs. And it was really clear to us early on that we really wanted to be more concerned with helping him to live the life that he wants to live, and prioritize that over what Medicaid's going to pay to reimburse us for. And so I think Hope did a calculation at one point. I'm sure it's different now, but like there was like over $2,000 worth of services that we provided that we never reimbursed for. But that was okay, because Justin getting to go to his Magic the Gathering clubs every week, and having somebody else go to double up to a doctor's appointment so that he could really get the care that he needed there. Those are the things that are more important to us than only what Medicaid provides, which is a lot different than what Justin has experienced from other providers in our area. So go ahead. I hope you can go to the next one.
Yeah. So that's the end of this section around intentions. And it was originally our intention to break into groups here and have discussion. And I know that that's one way to learn. I guess, Linda, what I'd like to do is to give people the option of doing that, or for us to be able to get all the way through to the end of our presentation about what we learned in the pandemic, because I don't think we can do both, unfortunately. Can I get some feedback from you, Linda, about direction on that?
Hope.
Yes.
I'm going to suggest, and I'm seeing people kind of agree with me. I know folks would appreciate the meaning making, but they also really are deeply into the story you've shared and really want to hear you be able to share the lessons that you've learned.
Yeah, I think that for this group might be more powerful use of time. And Whitney and I, or at least I can't speak for Whitney, I'm willing to stay along after if people, really want to process more, but I think that probably is our best. So let's get back to our slide here.
Yeah.
So those are like our intentions, right? This is what we want to see happen. So the question then becomes, what are the design features that match up with that, right? And how do we organize ourselves to be able to successfully do those things? So one of those features is to completely reframe the problem. For most people in most organizations, the problem is either that the person has a disability, or they can't take a shower by themselves, or their parents need a break, or they need something to do during the day, and those are the problems. We really believe that the problem needs to be reframed. And the problem is that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have historically been left out of society. Like, that's our task. That's the problem. The problem is not the person. The problem is being left out. Another essential design feature is relying on a solid theory of practice to guide our decision making. And those of you who know me know that I am on this soapbox often, but I'm not sure how people do the best work, the most ambitious work, without having a theory of practice, and in particular, without knowing SRV. A very brief definition of SRV is the major goal is to create or support socially valued roles for people in their society. Because if a person holds valued social roles, that person is highly likely to receive from society those good things in life that are available to that society. So like I said earlier, we don't have the good things in life to give people, right? They're not ours to hand out. And so the way that people go about accomplishing those things in life need to be the same way that everyone else does. And SRV gives us so much direction on how to make decisions about the design of our service, about the design of custom supports around individual people. I have no idea how we would do what we do without it. One of the things when people come to visit, and several of you all have been to visit us, thankfully, but one of the things that people notice when they come, the feedback we always get is, it's amazing that everybody is so much on the same page. Like we can almost finish each other's sentences, right? And it's because we have this common understanding about what it's going to take for people to have access to those good things in life. So I would very highly recommend SRV, or at least some clear theory of practice. Another really important design feature is that of establishing productive partnerships with the people we support and their families and allies. In other words, we can't do this without, right, a combined commitment to this. One of the things that we do when someone approaches us about possibly being involved in their life is go through a process, and Whitney and I were talking today that it might be a little too lengthy. But a really engaging process of making sure that people understand how things would be different if we support them as opposed to what they're accustomed to or might get if they shopped around from somebody else. So we spend a lot of time doing that. And we ask families, do you really think we're the right provider for you? Because there's going to be some explicit commitments we expect you to make. And so part of this is part of the document that we go over with them and provide to them, actually even before most of the time meeting face to face. But it says we serve people of all abilities. However, Mattingly Edge is not always the right service provider for everyone. In fact, we fondly say Mattingly Edge is not for the faint of heart. Likewise, not everyone makes a good partner for Mattingly Edge. To successfully partner with Mattingly Edge, individuals and their families and allies must meet the following conditions. First one is commitment to embracing and supporting a lifestyle consistent with the values that were described earlier in this same document. And the investment of time and patience needed for us to create custom supports, because we don't have something prefabricated for you. There's going to be a process to building and creating those supports and building them up to whatever level you might want or need. An eagerness to try new things, grow new relationships, and explore new places in community. That we're talking about building a richer, more robust, community-based life, and you've got to be willing to engage in those kind of things. Access to adequate funding to be able to provide the services, and then involvement of family members, allies, and or guardians who maintain the primary roles in decision-making and support related to. These are things that we are fairly hands-off about, and that is medical care. We'll take people to get medical care. We'll monitor medical care, but when it comes to decisions about that, there needs to be somebody in that person's life that maintains that kind of knowledge and relationship. Financial well-being, we will help teach people about using a debit card, about balancing their accounts, et cetera. But in terms of big financial decisions, we do not want to be in that kind of relationship with people. And finally, family responsibilities. People should spend holidays with family. And people need somebody in their life, not a direct support worker who's paid to be with them on Christmas Day. And so making sure that we have that we're serving the right people. Now, not many families, in all honesty, come to us, read this, and either fully understand it or fully agree with it, right? And so we're not looking for full kind of compliance. What we're looking for is common ground to work on, that we agree that we will treat and expect this person to be adult, that we will use normal, typical, average ways of accomplishing things, that we'll look for friends outside of special places. And so we seek that common ground to make that happen. Another essential design feature is hiring the right people and then masterfully matching the people. And so the right people, we've alluded to some of this already, but the right people are people who figured out how to have a good life themselves, people who have succeeded at doing things that were hard and took a long time. So people who don't give up easily, people who are well connected to other people, who are good models for the folks that they might be involved with, who can live with a fair amount of needing to be flexible and switching gears. So there's a certain set of kind of common characteristics that you need to just be a good support worker. But then there's also the issue of matching. And so we said we customized all of our services. So we're often looking for very specifically somebody with a specific skill or a specific life experience. So for instance, right now, we're looking for someone who perhaps has diabetes and has learned how to manage their diabetes through exercise and medication, and can be a good model and an encourager for someone we support who is not doing as good of a job in managing diabetes. So that would be just one example of that. Graham is a very, very social young man, and where he's going to want to hang out at bars. And he needs somebody supporting him. Not always. He goes to bars by himself in certain situations, but depending on if it's a new place or whatever, somebody who would fit into that, right? That social group. So it wouldn't be me, right? It needs to be a young person who's really social and willing and interested in spending some time in bars. This is one of the things, by the way, that I think Whitney Case is masterful at doing. And so the match has some of those. In addition to that, we want the match to be something where the two people have something in common that they both relish, something that is fun for both of them, so that the direct support work can also be more fun to the employee. We also have this idea of embracing giftedness, and thanks to Judith Snow, right, who introduced this concept to us decades ago, we've gotten pretty good at using that approach in thinking about the people we support. What is it they have to offer? What are they showing up to contribute? How do they have mutual relationships? But I would say it's only been recently that we actually pay a lot of attention to giftedness of everybody. And so we have a lot of really talented people at Mattingly. Let me see what I have down here. We've got painters, videographers, furniture makers, knitters, cooks, graphic artists, teachers, decorators, storytellers. We have people who have a lot of talent in addition to supporting someone. And so when we can maximize their ability, the staff's ability to use their own talents, not only is their job satisfaction increased, but they also are able to offer new experiences to the people that they support, potentially, and at least introduce something new. And if it turns out that that person is in fact interested and enjoys this thing, then you've got a really good model, right? Showing people how to become better and how to pursue that interest. And so the giftedness applies to outside of the people we support, to include our staff. But we also embrace giftedness when we're thinking about networking, right? It's another way. And so this networking can work both ways. You can be reaching out, looking for a specific person or a specific skill or experience. But you could also do the reverse. You can be out and about in the world and meet somebody, right, who happens to be a seamstress, and then ask yourself the question, do we know anybody who might be interested in exploring sewing, right? And so it's a habit of looking around and noticing what people have to contribute, and how do we help the people we support benefit from that contribution. We also have built a practice around committing to a good life for all. I have to confess that for many years, I was rabid about our workforce helping people have a good life. And it's probably been in the last 3 to 4 years that I have really come to recognize that we really need to be consistent. If everybody should be entitled to a good life, everybody should be entitled to a good life, right? And so we pay a lot more attention to supporting our workforce to also have a good life now. And that looks a lot like this. Many of you probably know David Petoniak, and I remember the first time I heard him say, a person's needs are best met by a person whose needs are met, right? So we want our workforce to have their needs met. We've done a number of really conscious things to try to do that. 2 years ago now, in January, we raised our minimum wage. Nobody works in this organization for less than $15 an hour. And that was from our previous $12 an hour. And so that's pretty competitive around here. I believe the average is just under $10 here. We also created, we heard that we were losing people because there was no way to advance. So we created a career lattice where people could, in fact, continue to grow and benefit from their growth and longevity and I'll speak a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We committed to individual mentoring so that people can really grow and we understand the direction that they want to grow in, and assist them to do that, not as a whole workforce, but as an individual person. That we've helped people look for opportunities for growth. So we often send things out saying, would you be interested in this class? Would you be like to do this or that? We put a lot of emphasis on team building and flexibility so it can be a good job and people can still have a good family life too. In other words, it's not impossible to get off work because you want to go to your daughter's kindergarten graduation, but the team and the built-in flexibility allows to do that. We do lots of recognition and celebration. We also support people around well-being. We not only have an employee assistance program that we encourage people to take advantage of, but we also pay for mindfulness and meditation classes and that kind of thing. We're also pretty good when people are having a difficult time for whether it's because your pet died or because you have a mother who is just diagnosed with Alzheimer's or whatever it might be, of being there for people. We cook meals and deliver them to people. We send plants, we send cards, we leave messages of concern and such. And so we really want our workforce to also have a good life. Another essential design is this notion of drawing a line in the sand. So some of our colleagues around here would say that we were rigid, which is an interesting word to use for the most flexible organization. But I see where they're coming from, and that's because there are some things that we are not willing to negotiate. One of them is individualized service, right? That the idea that we do things one person at a time, that we are not willing to do things in groups, even when it's really tempting. Even when it's really tempting, we are not willing to do things in groups. And so we've had to draw a line in the sand. Several years ago, in America anyway, there was a new funding source called WIOA. And the purpose of the program was to help students be better prepared to go to work when they leave school. And there's a lot of money in that program, a lot of money. And our mission is very consistent with that. And we were really excited about it until we learned that you had to do it in groups. And we just were not willing to do it in groups. And so we had to turn that down. Another example of taking this individualized notion to the nth degree is that, one of the things that happens oftentimes is one person goes to a fellow we supported named Rufus, went to a Forever Fit class at the YMCA. And it's a class for people his age, older folks who are just trying to stay fit, not even get fitter, but to stay healthy. And Rufus had a really welcoming, really positive experience in that class, right? And so the temptation to say, somebody else, let's send somebody else over there, right? It was really tempting. So now we literally claim public community spaces and say, that's Rufus's place. Everybody else stay away so that he has the best chance of being one of us instead of being one of them. We're also not negotiable about being customized. Our services, we have no template, we have no schedule, we have no support workers identified for you. We have absolutely no program about how you spend your time. We have no location. That it has to be designed and built for you so that it meets your needs. And the biggest challenge to this is families who want us to hurry up, right? And wants to just give me your best DSP, right? Don't you have anybody available now that you can plug in? And it's a temptation, but we really try to stay firm to the idea that if you give us the time, we have a much better chance of getting this right and it working for everybody's benefit. And then finally, drawing a line in the sand around only exploring socially valued options, right? So that even though many people with disabilities, right, might be served in community settings, they aren't always socially valued settings. And so an example of that here would be that one of the places that Shanae could have found a place to live is in a high-rise apartment that's all people who are poor, right? Which places her, right, into juxtaposed to a devalued group and reduces the chances that she will be seen as a valued citizen and therefore more likely to have good relationships. So we're pretty strong about these things. We don't flex much about that. Still another one is refusing to let the funding sources dictate what we do. In our community in Kentucky, the service providers do what the manual tells you to do, and they don't do a thing more than that. And so the problem is that what most people need, there is not a service that matches up directly, that much of what people need is not covered or not paid for. And so we had to decide, are we going to only do what Medicaid says? And we made the decision to not be what we call a Medicaid, that's the funding source, plantation. We're not going to enslave people, right, in the name of a funding source. And so our board has explicitly said, we raise funds as a nonprofit because the standard of living that Medicaid offers you is not a very good standard of living. We will, in fact, that commitment also helps us avoid those transactional relationships with people versus personal ones. And so we hold very strong to this. Another really essential design feature for us is this idea of addressing big systemic barriers. So one of the things that happens, and I bet you've all had experiences with this, is that there are common systemic social barriers that keep people from having a good life, right? And they often get used by service providers as a good excuse for settling for what currently is. I'm going to share 3 quick examples about that. So one of them is the idea of affordable, accessible, valued, integrated housing, right? Which is virtually non-existent. We have to create it in this community. We ran into that barrier and continue to run into that barrier and decided that somebody needed to do something about it. We wrote a grant to our DD Planning Council and received a large housing solutions grant where we have a full-time attorney who is working on these systemic barriers. And we've begun to do things like have better access, quicker access to Section 8 vouchers. We're looking at the creation of a co-housing development and such. And so rather than sit back and say, well, people just can't have homes of their own because it doesn't exist, we try to address those. Another example was the one Whitney mentioned earlier around guardianship, right? That we really are stepping in and trying to, first of all, if people have state guardians, identify a private citizen as a guardian. And from there, really working with the private citizen on working on supported decision-making so that people might get out of the guardianship system completely. The third example I'll share is that we frankly were not having much success finding good jobs for people with really significant impact of disability. And so we went to visit some programs. We did some research and found where are the best, where is it happening that people are actually getting jobs. And one of the places was in Utah, a program called Pathways to Careers. And they have a paid internship system there. And so we wrote a grant to our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation and were able to fund the work of creating a similar internship program whereby people who have more significant impact of disability, we either have the benefit of learning and trying things so they can decide what they enjoy the most and are good at if they've never had work experience or never have, or to be able to prove themselves to an employer, right, who would then hire them for that kind of job, or it allows for a bit more time for a person if they need to learn a job that would take longer than other people a bit to do that. So these are just three examples of rather than accepting excuses, doing the work of trying to address the barriers. And most service providers don't do that. We also believe it's really important to attend to the culture of the organization. That culture can be the thing that keeps employees around and that makes the job pleasant. So this is a piece of word art that just reflects some of the kind of things that we try to create as a community of people. And we believe in this so strongly that we've really implemented it in a number of ways. One is the morning of day one of orientation, I personally spend a couple of hours talking about culture, talking about who do we want to be to each other, what kind of place we want to be, an example of what we want the world to be like. So what we expect people to do as a result of that. We also follow up in around this kind of thing by recognizing when people are actually doing, right, are acting on in this consistent way. And so we believe that's really important. We also believe that it's important to pay attention to how and with whom you spend your time and attention. I often really get pressured to hang out with executive directors or to hang out with the funders or to hang out, in meetings that are, and frankly, I avoid a lot of that, in part because it tends to be people with lots of excuses and lots of negative stuff and talking about people like they're exchangeable. And I don't need that in my mindset. I don't need that influence, that impact. It doesn't help me do my work. It gets in the way of me doing my work. And so paying attention, it means also that everybody in this organization spends time with people with disabilities. Everybody in the organization spends time with people with disabilities and often in support kind of roles. And so if we pay attention to who we're spending time with and what are the topics of conversation and avoid those things that are going to distract or discourage us. So Whitney's going to share a little bit about the essential design feature around our model.
Right, so we call it a network model. And we, for a long time, tried to explain it to people. People had a hard time wrapping their minds around it. So we've kind of come up with a graphic. And so what I'm going to start with is kind of what this looks like when you get support from us. So if you are that person in the middle, you might have a support team, and it varies from person to person. How much support do you actually need? Some people we support 24/7, some people we support 20 hours a week. And so the number of people around you is reflected on that. And so this is what a team might look like for somebody. And hope you want to go to the next one. And then if you pull back some, you can see the network. So that was an individual person's team, and this is what that network looks like. And the person in the middle of this one is a community facilitator. And this person is responsible for ensuring the relevance and potency of community services on behalf of 6 to 8 people. And they are responsible for focusing on the person's vision and also supervising the DSPs. So you've got the yellow person is our community facilitator. The person who is in orange are the different people that we support. And that tealish, greenish color are our support workers. And so as you can see, there could be an instance where a teal person might work on 2 different teams, but they're going to have that same supervisor. And we have, I think we're going to talk in a little bit about some other prototypes, some other people that kind of come to play within the network. But then I don't think, Hope, you don't have another, it
No.
doesn't go out again, but like currently we have 3 of those networks and we're growing. And then that will end up growing to a 4th network.
Thanks, Whitney.
Yeah. No,
Do
go
you have
ahead.
something else? Yeah.
Nope, that was it.
Okay. So another essential design feature is just if you want to be ambitious, if you want to be innovative, if you want to be the best at the work, you got to make a significant investment in both learning and time to reflect. You have to invest in that. Last year, we sent 24 people out of town to social revalorization training, a four-day event. We send people to national conferences. We send people to state conferences. We send people to the Summer Institute and have for years. We also bring people in. Several of you have been here in consulting kind of roles. We've done exchanges with KFI, for instance. I went there to do some work for them, and they sent some folks here to do some work with us. We have an extensive library that we encourage people, if they're interested in something, to come in and learn. And then we almost always have some kind of ongoing internal training that's happening. And so I, for instance, have been doing a Wednesday morning class on implementing SRV with 7 employees. So we spend a lot of time doing that. Another essential feature is the notion of trying to innovate through prototyping. And this is the Theory U, which we, many of us have been to the full Theory U training and have used this methodology. All I have time to really say is that, in a nutshell, it's about before building or growing something to scale, trying it on a small scale and growing and learning from there. So Whitney mentioned earlier, one of our prototypes at one point was we feared that the person at the center of that network, the community facilitators, were spending too much time doing day in and day out kinds of things. And we really wanted them to be laser focused on the vision people have for their lives and support workers doing good work. And so we decided that career lattice, what we would do is to create some positions that would support the facilitators. And what we initially did was create a position called the health and wellness person. And this was a person who was going to, pay a lot of attention to doctor's appointments and Mars and, all of the detail around that kind of stuff for all 3 networks, right? So they'd be a support to the facilitators in that. The second role was something called a home coordinator. And we really had to do with that, making sure that people have dominion over their own home and are fully exercising the privileges and benefits of having a home of their own. So they'd be focused on things like how nice people's homes are and decorating, and do they have the materials to the stuff they need to entertain, and do they know how to entertain, and so forth and so on. And then we had another position that we called the flex time specialist. And the idea of the flex time specialist is we had grown enough that having somebody kind of that's not scheduled to work with anybody, but could work with just about anybody, so that they don't have a schedule, they're virtually on call and fill in. And we're fortunate enough to have a person who's worked here now for 7 years before I was here, and knows everybody we support, and is somebody who's pretty good at doing all of that. So we promoted people from within to those positions as a prototype. What we ended up learning is the health and wellness and the home coordinator positions just didn't work out the way we thought they did. But the flex time one worked out really well. So we kept the flex time and we rethought what kind of support would it look like for the facilitator. And now each facilitator has their own what's called network coordinator, who takes care of a lot of the logistical, business, documentation, recording kinds of things, again, so the facilitators can stay focused on. So that's an example of prototyping, learning from it before taking something to scale. All right, we're moving on to part 3 here, and I think this is going to be pretty straightforward. So we think we're going to be about right on time. So what are we learning from the pandemic? One is that people we support can contribute by actually being the architect of positive new opportunities for other people. I'm going to share a story at the end of this listing of Warren, who did exactly that. He was the architect of something that helped make other people's lives better. Whitney shared a little bit about Graham and Randy's relationship. So during the pandemic, where things are harder, the idea of fully capitalizing on all social engagement. So, you know, Graham originally met Randy as a storyteller, and that grew into, right, him helping teach, and that grew into him inviting her over as a friend. And so really trying to capitalize on what is available is another something we've learned. This one was a hard one for me, that we really have to keep a check on our natural tendency to do for instead of with. So like a lot of people, when COVID hit, right, we all went into crisis mode. All of us did. And one of the things that we noticed is that we were doing things for people instead of with them. We were making sure they had disinfectant in their homes. We were making sure they had masks available if visitors needed them. And so we had to step back and say, hold on a second. You know, people need to be involved with, just like anybody else, learning what do you do, how do you live during COVID, and what do you do? And so it really caused us to realize that we needed to put the time and effort in helping people understand what COVID was, helping people understand the responsibilities that adults have to keep themselves and other people safe. But that tendency was kind of alarming to me once I saw us in it. That quarantine is a great time to try and to learn new things. Whitney shared some of the things that Graham was doing, but Shanae is also has taken up weaving during this time, and my sister-in-law Anne is learning to make some new dishes, and it's just a great time to try. And if people are good at it and or interested in that, we can begin to brainstorm about, as soon as this COVID thing lifts, how do we get people involved in those new things in their life? We also learned that technology is no longer optional, that whether it's to stay in touch with your friends over Zoom or whether it's to have a doctor's appointment online, that technology is necessary. And so we helped assist and made sure that everybody we support has both internet and virtual devices and platforms. We also learned a lot about the use of our PPP funds and COVID tests, that what role can our organization play in helping people? And we actually used our PPP funds to pay out to people who were doing the work additional bonuses. And so people doing the work and showing up and doing a good job were beneficiaries of those PPP funds. That's, again, part of taking care of your workforce and helping your workforce lives be better too. We also recently, several weeks ago now, purchased through a connection COVID tests for anybody in our community. It can be people that work for us and their families. It can be people we support and their families. It can be board members and their families. But the idea that we have tests here that are the finger prick instead of the nasal thing, and you get results in 8 minutes, and they're free of charge. So this week I've been handing them out left and right as people are trying to figure out, keep each other safe and such. We also learned that we just need to be proactive, that we have to, it's harder because there are so many limitations on what people can do, so that it just doesn't work. It really is never a good idea, but it really doesn't work during COVID to just show up and say, so what are we going to do today? That adds to people's kind of frustration and boredom and so forth and so on. And so we have to be really proactive and have plans, and that we have to think about dignified risk. And so one of the things that our state attempted to do is, if you receive Medicaid funding, right, you can't leave your residence, right? Lockdown. You're literally in lockdown. And we were expected to enforce that kind of lockdown. And we took a really different approach to that, and in fact contacted our funders and said, we think that's unreasonable. And that's across the board. What we'd like to do is work with each person individually to decide what is the extent of their risk, what are the safest ways for them to go out, and to weigh and learn to be a part of that decision making, because all of us have taken some risk during COVID. We've all taken measured risk, and it's been a very personal decision for us to make. And so this notion of people, we've also had to advocate more during the pandemic, because when things get rough, the most devalued people always are put to the bottom. So we've had to advocate, for instance, that people are allowed to bring a support worker if they go to the emergency room. We've had to advocate, again, that people are able to consider for themselves what level of risk is safe for them. And so advocating has been, and we've also learned this is, to me, has been really interesting, this notion of how critical good paid support can be. I have to admit that prior to COVID, I would value the relationships that people have with people in community, unpaid friends, neighbors, and colleagues. I would value them actually over the paid support and paid relationships in people's lives. And during COVID, we've seen many people who are alive only because of good paid support. And if you look at what's happening for most of us, our little bubbles have gotten very, very, very small. And the same is true for the people we support. And there's some, for the moment, there are people that were in their lives that are not in their bubble, right? And so good paid support is really important in people's lives. And we need to value it more as an organization than we have. And then we also learned when we were required to have each employee of the organization could only work with one person. They called it honeybee. They don't want the possibility of contagion and spread. And so we had to really, like many of you probably, reorganize and make some hard decisions about who's going where and supporting whom. And we've also had kind of these regular, talking about the value of reflection, we've had regular Zoom meetings with employees saying, what are we learning about the pandemic? What do you need? What good is happening? How can we be more helpful? And that kind of thing. And one of the feedback that we've gotten is that the smaller team actually works better. That when there's a really large team, nobody feels compelled to be the person to create a certain, outcome in the person's lives. And it's harder to work closely as a large team. It ends up kind of fractioning into different groupings. And so this notion of smaller teams might be more responsive going forward. So for instance, at one point, Shanae had 12, 13 workers. And now I believe she's at 8 or 9. And so that's more manageable and more likely to do a good job. And then the last story is just quickly the story of Reconnecting Threads, which is a project that Beth Mount has been working with us on. And the project started by just asking these questions. How might we capture stories that illustrate this transformation in the lives of people supported by Mattingly Edge before, during, and after? And the vision was to invite people that we support to in telling their stories as living examples of strengthening the gifts and identity, relationships, belonging, employment, adapting, and co-creating with others to make visible that which was not seen. And so it's been a delightful effort, and I want to share one person's story of that. The fellow there on the far left-hand side is a man named Warren. And this is a group of Warren's supporters. Roddy is there, the man, and Becca is the facilitator for that team. And they are meeting actually here in our office to talk with Warren about whether he'd like to be involved in this project. And if so, what ideas he might have for himself. Warren is a really manly guy. He came of the generation and grew up rural, who has certain belief about what men do and don't do and what women do and don't do. And so the things in his life need to be very masculine. And so he had begun exploring pre-COVID he initially explored it as possibly a business venture, decided he'd rather do it as a hobby, learning to use tools and doing woodwork. And so we knew that he had that hobby. We also knew that his faith community was very important to him. This is some folks from Warren's church who got together and celebrated his birthday after church. And they do this every year. They didn't do it for COVID, but have done it previously. And this community of people is Warren's family. He really doesn't have family. So it's a really important group of people to him. Warren is a prayer chaplain and an usher at church and belongs to the men's group there. And so he would go to church like 3 times a week for various reasons. And he was really super missing folks during COVID. And so he agreed he wanted to do this. So we started thinking about what might be a project. And Warren did a bit of research along with Roddy, and they went on some road trips, which were great things to do during COVID So they went online and did some road trips and learned about this barn quilt idea, which originally early on was communication during the Underground Railroad that would send a symbol that if you saw this symbol, you knew that this is a safe place to come. Or if you saw this symbol, it meant go south, don't keep going north or whatever. So they had messages to them. And Warren was fascinated with these barn quilts and the meanings behind them. And they went on a little road trip and visited and took pictures of a lot of them in Kentucky. And he decided that he really liked this one and wanted to replicate this one with the assistance of people from church. And so what he did was get wood, get the supplies and the materials, and mark and cut out the wooden pieces that would need to go together to make that. And so here he is, after marking them, cutting them, and using this bandsaw to cut them and sanding the edges to get them all ready, and then laying out and numbering them and putting together a small jar of paint that matched that particular piece. And so what he did then was take a bag, and I used to have a picture of the bag, but I don't think I did. Oh, and then he had a guest list, and we went together and made the guest list of who from church he wanted to invite to that. And one of the talents I told you people in our organization have, one of them is graphic art, and made this beautiful invitation for Warren to extend. And so the idea was that he put together a small bag that had a couple of two pieces, wooden pieces, 2 little bottles of paint, a paintbrush, and a snack and directions, and a little flyer about barn quilts and what they're about. And he delivered them to the people interested in getting together. And then there was a Zoom meeting where people got together. We had planned to do it in person because things were looking a little bit better at that time. But what happened is a week before that, our governor named us a red state, and we were back into quarantine, and so it had to be changed. And so these are some people from his church. You can see Don there, who's from, and Roddy is there to support him. And so they had a Zoom call, and I just want to it's 20 seconds, I think, show you, this was an hour and a half painting session, but I've clipped out a very small part of it that made every bit of the effort worth it.
And in Warren, they're going to have something at the Megan Caverns, a drive-through holiday program. So that's something I would encourage you to do. And we would be willing to pick you up and throw you in the back seat and take you there.
Okay.
So out of that came an invitation to additional opportunities for Warren to socialize. We have we have 8 of those kind of stories, but that's an example of just one of the ways that it's helped people stay in touch by doing collaborative, cooperative projects that cause them to kind of come to have reason to come in contact with each other. Look at that. We have 5 whole minutes. I appreciate you all listening this whole time for 2 hours as opposed to it being an interactive thing. I'm more than glad to stick around. I'd love to hear questions, feedback, comments. It's a lot of stuff.
Hope if I could add another interesting thing that it didn't make it to this presentation because it's literally as we speak happening right now, but we've had other situations where because of COVID, people are sick and tired of being in congregate settings. And so after years of trying to talk this man's sister into like, maybe he would be better living in his own place, and God, he's cussing out his neighbors left and right. What if he didn't have to live in this apartment complex for people with disabilities? And so finally COVID gave her the courage to say yes. And today, it's either today or tomorrow, they keep switching around, is the closing day. The family bought him his own condo in the neighborhood that he loves and is a very big part of. And on January 15th, he will be moving into his own home. And that was because of COVID, because
after 20
sister
years
would have been okay just trucking along. 20 years in that place. And enough was enough, and COVID was the reason to do it. So.
Well, folks, I think enough is enough.
More than enough, maybe, right, Jack?
What a gift, you guys. That's amazing stories. Thank you. Great way to begin the new year with, for 20 years, you're stuck in 1,000 ways, and then you turn it into the opportunity to change. So, want to deeply thank you, but there aren't words for that. So we'll just let you know this was the last of the sessions from the November 15th Ideas That Matter. And we want to invite everyone to sign up. Hopefully, within the next couple of days, you'll both get a newsletter and it'll be up on the website. But, all the normal things are happening. It's not going to take 20 years, but it'll take a little time. But there are going to be 3 teams of presenters on the 14th. They'll do the short presentation, and then we'll have some breakouts. And each of these people will, in turn, offer additional sessions, much like we've been privileged to have with you guys today. So it'll be Diamond Hargis on social banking, and Joe and Beth and Kirk on the threshold for change, and Dorona King on, I can't read it, and I've just lost it. But anyway, you...
Holding the story.
Holding the story, yes, it would be. So just want to say, Thank you, one and all. This has been indeed a remarkable session. Fabulous way to begin the new year. If we can't figure out gifts and opportunities after this, we ought to go home. But if we go home, then there are incredible opportunities to do things because we've discovered you can do almost anything anywhere. And the people we need are right around us all the time, always. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, one and all. Been a great
Good
day.
to briefly see some of your faces, people I miss seeing.
Thank you.
Really good to see everyone.
Yeah.
Hope and Whitney, thank you. And I know you offered to stay on for a couple minutes. We can do that with folks and we'll.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, we can.
Thanks.